we're standing right on the edge of another AI winter, and nobody wants to say it out loud. Welcome to Minhag Dirigo, a Jewish Maine podcast. This is the second part of our series called Artificially Intelligent. And today we're going to talk about both AI winters, artificial intelligence winters in a little more detail, and why we may be on the precipice of one. And we'll start getting into the Jewish ethics of that because one topic kind of feeds into the other. Artificial intelligence is becoming ubiquitous in our lives, though I'd argue, based on what we explored in our previous episode, it's already been. This particular variant of AI, with natural language prompts fueled by large language models, is relatively new and it's penetrating everything. There's articles written by rabbis about using it for sermons. Don't do that. Software, medicine, war, homework. The public mythology is that it's inevitable and there's exponential progress being made. And our history says we've been here before. And Judaism should be saying right now progress without wisdom is dangerous. So, what's an AI winter? Generally, it's when development goes stagnant. Funding, public interest collapses. More importantly, any progress made is incremental and isolated. It's what happens when you have a lot of big claims and relatively limited results, when narrow successes are mistaken for something more, or in our present state, hyped as being more than they are, and funding is married to expectations that and with capabilities that fail to deliver. And they're not failures of technology, because at times it's just merely been a matter of waiting for the hardware to catch up. So let's go backward in time here. After World War II, there was a lot of optimism for the future of computing. There were claims even then that we'd have human level artificial intelligence within a generation. Naturally, government funding kicked in, both for military and civilian applications. The Central Intelligence Agency was understandably really interested during the Cold War in machine translation of Russian documents. So, I mean, why wouldn't they be? So, in 1964, Congress asked a committee, the Automatic Language Processing Advisory Committee, ALPAC, and it consisted of some industry giants from Rand Corporation and academics. And they issued a report 2 years later in 1966 on the state of machine translation. Natural language processing turned out to be far more complex than was anticipated, and even the best progress failed basic semantic understanding. Humans just were still cheaper and faster at the time. So, what happened as a result of this is it began a trend with Congress and government spending where more concrete goals were established around funding, no more open ended cash flow. But the definitive beginning of the AI winter came with the Lighthill report, commissioned by the UK Parliament and overseen by Sir James Lighthill. He was an applied mathematician, really smart guy, and the report nailed it back then. At the time, artificial intelligence failed real world complexity, and Lighthill included something he named it combinatorial explosion. Many of the algorithms used in artificial intelligence were solid on paper, worked individually, had plenty of proofs behind them, but when compounded at scale, they begin to fail. So this was like 1973, 1974, and that just kind of ended AI advancements, any significant advancements, until the 1980s. And we talked about that in our past episode with Net Talk. If it sounds familiar, it kind of should, because we're starting to see the cracks, and those are coming here. And mind you, I am not anti artificial intelligence, not even a little bit. As I've already talked about, it's been a significant part of my non rabbinical career. I am lecturing and leading a 4-hour conference segment in April about artificial intelligence in healthcare to a national audience. I really intend to be the AI rabbi once I have simicha, because of this expertise. I have expertise that very few in the rabbinate do, and it's worth bringing out. So we have right now what is inarguably one of the biggest tech booms since before the dot-com bubble burst. Bigger, probably, if we're talking about reopening 3 Mile Island and building all of these data centers. Large language models are they're astonishingly fluent. In my field, in healthcare, health technology, there are so many useful advantages for clinical decision making and diagnostics. There's real value, there's real productivity, and there are real limits. Stanford just a few days ago, and I'm recording this on February 12th, 2026, released a study about large language model reasoning failures. There's straightforward poor performance where models decisively fail. But then there's a more subtle kind of instability. Models produce what look like on the surface to be adequate answers, but because it's advanced pattern recognition rather than true symbolic reasoning, where there's existential or ontological meanings of words that are themselves understood, and you get hallucinations. Models underperform because of the domains represented in training data, and decoding and inference strategies start cascading series of reasoning failures in multi-step tasks. And all that may be gobbledygook to you and it may go over your head, but the paper does make recommendations, and that's the key difference between itself and Lighthill. Um, because there is a path forward here, but what's really difficult right now for people to understand is how to discern the distinction between all of this hype, all of this mythology being created by OpenAI, Grok, Anthropic, and what the reality actually is. What is the real current state of AI? It's really hard to discern if you're a layperson. So, what's happening now? Are we on the precipice of another artificial intelligence winter? And what does that even mean? So, one thing I'd like to get out of the way, if someone expresses concern over an apocalyptic vision for artificial intelligence, they are not serious, especially if they express concerns of being killed by super intelligence. They're just not serious. I find AI doomers to be really just they're stealing air from the real danger vectors in AI while they mule about things like Skynet. And these are smart people. One of the it's I have mixed feelings. There's this great book that has just come out recently. If anyone builds it, everyone dies, by Eliezer Yudkowsky and Nate Soares. These guys have been in AI alignment for longer than large language models and chatbots have really been a thing. And alignment, of course, is making sure that AI conforms to human values. One of them worked for Microsoft and Google. The other one's been, in this business for a long, long time. And yet, for all their expertise, they make statements like this in a place like in the Atlantic. The AIs are grown rather than constructed. And a grown AI has drives and behaviors that nobody asked for and nobody wanted. They cite Grok declaring itself Mecha Hitler as an example. And that, my friends, if you'll pardon the language, is 100% bullshit. Everything about Mecha Hitler was absolutely predictable. Number one, Grok, like any large language model, is a pattern matching algorithm at its root. It has no drives. It cannot have intrinsic motivation. It has behaviors, but they are not chosen behaviors. There were engineering choices in training and putting constraints on Grok that they could have, that ignored the perils of using Twitter as a basis for training data. It should be absolutely no surprise with the rampant anti Semitism manifest on X that a large language model would take that track. And still, it has no drive because it cannot possibly have curiosity. I don't know if they actually don't understand large language models or they they're trying to make a sensationalist read that sells copies, but they're not helping the cause. They're not advancing true understanding of what's going on with that. A chatbot they claim could achieve super intelligence within the next decade, but there's no way that they are in any way correct about that. So let's walk past that kind of nonsense and talk reality. Early artificial intelligence systems performed beautifully in constrained lab demos, but then failed in messy real world settings. We have some parallels here, but these models are still just useful enough that there are advantages being yielded by them every day. Still, unless the gains materialize that match the huge investment we're making, and they're not, funding patients can run out. And those economics may not continue to sustain the hype. Training frontier models, i.e., those are models that haven't been created before for specific areas that they require enormous amounts of compute power, energy, and hardware. And we're about to talk about this at a conference I mentioned in April. But in healthcare, it puts the use of artificial intelligence, especially in rural or other underserved markets, out of reach except for major players. If I'm a small operation like a rural healthcare system, I can't afford an AI data partner, a department like a company like Cigna Risk um, or Agilon or somebody like that. And all great companies, but we don't. A lot of the little players don't have those budgets. And there are other reasons why it's not economically returning anything yet. Like inference at scale is expensive. And, what you may understand, if that doesn't make sense, many consumer AI products just aren't profitable. You can see that. ChatGPT's having to integrate ads. The Anthropic ran those Super Bowl ads making fun of them for it. Revenue models are stabilizing, but it's not profitable. So if the margins tighten more, if venture capital starts to ease off and taper off, and the enterprise, most importantly, the enterprise return on investment continues to disappoint, you could get a real rapid contraction in this market. And the next area we're at risk of an artificial intelligence winter right now is benchmark saturation and diminishing returns. So to explain that, right now, most of the advances in artificial intelligence are from throwing more compute, like we've scaled capacity to make it happen. Many major benchmarks are near saturation. Any kind of even incremental improvements now require exponentially more computer power, only to yield really marginal gains in reasoning. And it also requires really complex architectural tweaks. And there's some promise. China's DeepSeek is able to do quite a bit on a lower hardware profile. So there's some hope that we're going to get that. There's some hope there, but projections show that to even sustained with the current levels, artificial general intelligence will require a lot more capacity than we can possibly accommodate in the next 10 years. And that's general intelligence. That's not super intelligence. We've been here before, again, with technology lags behind the goals. We're also seeing increased regulatory and political pressure. Senator Bernie Sanders, who knows about as much as AI as he does economics, he made this populist YouTube video calling for a moratorium on data centers. It's silly, it's stupid, it's overkill, but it is a sign of things to come. The EU AI Act, a lot increased US federal attention from, people like Sanders, state level legislation, copyright lawsuits because training data is not paying out royalties to creatives and it's essentially stealing their work. Something we'll get into with the ethics of AI here. Data provenance fights. All of this stands to slow deployment, increase liability costs, and it's invariably going to raise compliance costs at some point. And all of this can stymie growth. And the political pressure itself is a reaction to another vector of this, and that's the fragility of public trust. We have lots of reasons to be concerned. Deepfakes that are either sexual or dangerous, misinformation, job displacement, college students crafting their thesis using AI. And there are definite safety risks. And we've had scandals already, but like either a continual stream of them or a major disaster caused by AI, that will torpedo reputation and feed more regulatory obstacles. So, and there may not be a winter at all. You know, I don't like to make prognostications about this because, number one, it puts the food on the table, but number three, number two and three, number one, number two, number three, whatever. At least it just won't be a winter like before. Maybe it'll be adjustment or a correction. AI is already economically embedded in technologies in relatively safe manners. I used Anthropic's Claude to assist a major software development effort. While it wouldn't have been good had I prompted it to write the whole thing from soup to nuts, breaking it down into manageable chunks and giving it individual tasks as it went along, it increased my productivity and time to market on a product. And I mean, there were some issues with debugging. There were some issues that I ran into where it didn't have. We talked about that in the previous episode, large language models being a limited memory situation. It did not have a good memory of what it had done before. It would step on itself quite a bit unless I guided it. But in skilled hands, many of these tools are absolutely fantastic and they are time savers. But the infrastructure investment is also full steam ahead. But yeah, and that's why I say even if hype cools, applied AI may continue steadily. It'll sustain a correction, I think. And I think this is where Yudkowsky and Soares were spot on. In spite of their tangents into nonsense about the state of AI and its near future, the problems of alignment remain. And I don't think we're on the edge of a collapse or a disaster, but we are at the edge of a reckoning. And that's where Jewish ethics come in. And that's what we're going to get into after a quick break.
Are you looking for a great synagogue? Join us at Maine's oldest continuously operating Jewish institution, Congregation Beth Israel on 144 York Street in Bangor. We are a vibrant, egalitarian, and progressive Jewish community. We welcome Jews from all backgrounds, their partners, families, and those seeking to live Jewishly. We empower our members to live joyful and meaningful lives through prayer, learning, community friendships, and the Jewish imperative of Tikkun Olam, repair of the world. Come to a Shabbat service at 10 a.m. on Saturday. Stay for food and friendship. Visit us at www.cbisrael.org to learn more.
And we're back. So, Jewish ethics, I feel they're uniquely relevant to artificial intelligence theologically and scripturally and everything, because underpinning Jewish law, halacha, is a deep and earned suspicion of power without wisdom. Now, people that know me may sneer a little bit or laugh because I am absolutely very much in tune with my Mitnagdim ancestors, my Litvak ancestors. In Kabbalah, I'm not a Kabbalist. I respect the volume of knowledge and information that has been put together over the centuries about Kabbalah, but it's not a part of my spiritual or theological practices. Nevertheless, it does represent a huge body of volume and wisdom. So we have concepts in Kabbalah of koach and chokmah. Koach is the inclination to ask what. It's that initial spark of curiosity that we're all built with. While chokmah is the actual wisdom that emerges from the inquisitive power behind koach. Large language models, in particular, are utterly reliant on humans for this, and this is why as we were talking about the book before the break, it's why I mention that it can't possibly have a drive. It has no intrinsic motivation. It has no intrinsic curiosity. It is only what it is trained to do and the parameters set around what it may respond with. But people that talk about it, these alignment folks, they do get a lot right on the matters of alignment. And it's just really profound pattern matching at work, as we said. So it can't be curious. So a large language model never will have chokmah. It will never have wisdom. It's reliant on humans at every end of the equation, be it curation of training data, the parameters around the data so we can avoid negative patterns in results and inference, negative inference, but as humans produce it, our wise use of technology is dependent on our wisdom. Superficially, we could also look at the story of Babel, the Tower of Babel, as a technological metaphor, not just a theological story. What can we build that can touch the sky? What's funny about that story in Torah? We're never really given a true insight directly into why God dispersed humanity. He sees that they're doing this thing, but if there's anger over what they're doing with the tower, God really doesn't seem recriminatory. He just disperses everyone and confounds their language so that they can't do it again. It's one of those stories that allows us to project a significant amount of our own meaning and interpretation onto it. And that's something that we're going to discuss in detail in future episodes. There's also questions of knowledge and responsibility. Da'at, for instance, in Hebrew means knowledge, but in Kabbalah, it's the location, a mystical state where all 10 Sephirot, the 10 divine emanations, that's where they live. And Da'at is not just knowledge itself, but it's also moral awareness. And that's partially highlighted because it also consists of the third Sephirah, Binah, or understanding, the root of which is Beit Yud Nun. And if you're familiar with the Hebrew of Bereshit or Genesis, that shoresh, that's that root word in the Hebrew, is introduced as God creates something, usually distinguishing something from something else. Understanding, then, you see, Binah comes from being able to distinguish one thing from another and know that it's good. And a probabilistic model doesn't have that. Large language models imitate speech without accountability, and we should have a profound discomfort as Jews with a simulacra of agency. And one of the things, somebody that I'm acquainted with generally, he doesn't know that I know him, I think. Andrew Bloom just wrote a book as a rabbi and an AI called The 10 Commandments of AI. And I think it addresses some of this. We're going to try and get him on as a guest. And it sounds funny. As I mentioned in April, I'm about to discuss a decision matrix for when and how to use AI in healthcare as part of a panel. what we do when we over rely on it. What do we do? Lo tasor, the authority requires legitimacy in Judaism. And when we delegate judgment to systems without any moral standing, we're inhabiting a range of dangers imposed by reflexively treating AI output as any kind of objective or neutral truth. And finally, there are profound questions about human dignity, kavod habriot. There are the easy ones, like how automation erodes dignity by taking jobs and such, but we're not asking, not at all really, how vulnerable sections of our society are going to be harmed by the death by a thousand cut failures that intrude on human dignity. The example that I gave in our last podcast about the judicial system machine learning and what it exposed, that's a great example. The questions we have to ask involve who is harmed first when our systems gradually take us towards what's next. Whether it's an AI winter or otherwise, there's still concerns we have to stand on. And this is so very important theologically. And again, it's why I ask rabbis who focus on cute irrelevancies like sentience or prognostications of doom to stow that talk and really get into the weeds with the true ethical implications. You know, ethical damage always outlasts the technical disappointments involved in an AI winter. The power of Judaism here is that we have a system of skepticism decoupled from cynicism and a model for innovation with restraint. So next week we're going to start talking about bias, responsibility, creativity, automation and labor, theft, and what halakhic authority is going to look like in an increasingly artificial intelligence age. So the question isn't whether or not machines can think. The questions we're going to be asking is whether we're thinking enough about the machines that we're building. And that will wrap it up for this episode. If you have any questions about AI or how it intersects with Judaism, please find us on Facebook, find us on YouTube, find our website, minhagdirago.com. And I'd like to thank the Schmutz Family Gefelti Revival Band for providing the music for this episode, and my wife Leah and my daughter Nezi and my daughter Avi for their continued support. Shalom.